talking today with Ron Minnema of Wyoming, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so Ron, you can begin at the beginning. Where and when were you born?
I was born in 1950, November, and right down in Grand Rapids at St. Mary's Hospital.
Okay.
And been a
And then did you grow up in the area?
Yes, I grew up on the southeast end of town.
Okay. And so you're born in 1950, so by the time you were a teenager, Vietnam was going on. Were you paying much attention to that?
Yeah, I was. When I was probably a 10th grader, my brother was drafted into the service, and he was over in Vietnam.
And what did he do there?
He was in radio lineman. He was stringing a line for radios and communication devices.
Okay, that would mostly be on bases.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
so-
he was
so-
at Cameron Bay.
Okay, okay, that's a relatively safe place to have
Yes,
gone.
very good.
As they
Yep.
went. All right. Also, I guess, what was your family doing for a living when you were growing up?
My dad worked for 22 years at New York Central Railroad, and somewhere in the early 60s they moved out of Michigan and sold or whatever, and he was actually unemployed for a year or two. I think there was a trade act going on then, and he sent him to Davenport University to learn how to clerk, which wasn't his bailiwick for sure. And so the whole time he was doing that, he was looking for a job. Finally got one at Wolverine Brass Works and finished out his career there.
All right. Now, did you graduate from high school?
Yes, South High School.
And when did you graduate?
1968. It was the last graduating class of that school.
All right. And so what did you do after you got out of high school?
I applied for jobs everywhere in the city and actually hooked one at Consumers Power at that time. I took drafting in classes at school, and they actually hired me for that purpose.
All right. And how long did you have that job?
Well, it turns out 41 years.
Okay.
So.
But before going in the service, how long were you there?
Oh, probably 18 months.
Okay. Now, by the time we're getting, I mean, things got really hot in 68, and then still a lot of stuff going on into 69. So were you expecting to get drafted at some point?
Yes, that was just what happened, I wasn't planning on going to college, and we knew that we'd graduate, try to get a job, and then we'd get our greetings from the government asking us to report at Fort Wayne, Detroit.
All right. So when did you get your greetings?
It was probably March or April of 1970.
Okay.
And then they gave me a couple months to wrap things up, and then I was gone.
So you go to Fort Wayne, you get a physical there?
Yes. Well, I had gone to pre-physicals
All
right after you register at 18.
Right.
So by this time, I'm almost 19, and I finally went from, once I was classified at 1A, then I just went there for, the final physical where they put you where they wanted you.
Right, and pretty much give you shots if they're doing
Right,
that.
you're inoculated, so.
Okay. There are sometimes stories about people trying to scam the system at the physicals, like pretending to have this illness or that one. Did you see any of that kind of thing?
I did not. In fact, I went under a unique situation. Before I was reporting, a friend of mine and I were watching a movie, Audie Murphy, To Hell and Back. And he says, as long as you're going in, I wonder if I could go in with you. And he inquired about it, and they did. They had a buddy thing that he could go with me, and they promised that we would be in basic training together. Beyond that, there was no promises, because he may be something. I may be a radio operator, which I was. So that was pretty great for me, because I had somebody I knew when I was in basic.
So where do they send you for basic?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
All right. And what was that like? Well, first of all, what happens when you get there? How do they treat you when you arrive?
Well, most people, especially now, would say they treated me like an animal, and pretty much I felt like one for a while.
So what were they doing?
Well, they'd call you any name that they could think of. They were pushing you right to the end, yelling in your ear, just like you see in the movies. I mean, mouth to mouth. And
Yeah. Did you have any sense of why they were doing that?
absolutely not at that time. I just know I hated it. And I figured I would because those are the stories that I had heard.
Right. So, I mean, had your brother told you anything about what to expect?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He coached me very well.
Okay. What kind of advice did he give you?
Don't volunteer for anything. And they don't hate you. They're just trying to get you to listen to them and them only.
All right. So what does the actual training consist of?
It was basically, you started out, it was all physical. You really had no classroom time, or they weren't trying to teach you anything. It was just getting you in a physical condition and a mental condition where if they yelled duck, you ducked. And that was basically, I found out later, that's really why they do what they do.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that anybody says anything like you heard your drill sergeant do, you did what they told you. So I understand that now. I didn't understand that then. But I remember I was with a friend. He was in a different platoon, so we didn't see a lot of each other. But when we had time off, we got to see each other and talk about what went on.
Okay. All right. And how long does that last?
8 weeks.
Okay. And were you in good physical shape when you went in, or?
I was probably in mediocre shape when in fact, yeah, the first 2 or 3 weeks were pretty taxing. I couldn't do some of the things they asked us to do, and we always had those tough guys that were in there that could do everything. But it evolved into a camaraderie where everybody helped everybody else. So when you're trying to carry a guy 100 yards, they're right alongside you, pushing you. And these are our own comrades,
right,
so to speak. So these are our fellow soldiers urging you to make it, so I think that's part of the reason I made it through boot camp. There's no question about it. By the time I was done, I was in pretty good physical condition.
Okay. Now, at what point do you know what kind of advanced training you're going to get?
Towards the end, I think maybe a week or two before the end, they took you into an area and had you fill out a bunch of paperwork and what you wanted to do, and asked you questions regarding that. And I asked to be a radio operator, and that's what I got.
Now, do you think that your work experience helped you there?
No, I can't see anything other than maybe doing what you're told when you're told to do it.
So as opposed to any technical knowledge from working for a power company?
Not really.
Okay.
No.
All right. So where do you go for the advanced training?
We went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and that is an armored base, but we had one building that was radio operators, and we spent a majority of our time in classroom learning Morse code. At that time, it was still a big deal.
Okay.
And so it was drilled into you until you could do it. And I kind of liked that portion of it because it was more civilized than what basic training was. It was, it seemed more technical, and I really enjoyed that 8 weeks.
Okay. Now, were you working with different types of radios or learning anything about how to fix a radio?
Yes, we had certain types of radios where we learned how to load an antenna, in other words, get the frequency just right for the type of antenna that we had, and just basic radio operating skills. Nothing really technical, but it was informative.
Okay. And did you work with the different types of radios that they were using, or only, because there's the kind that the radio operators carry around on their back in the field, as opposed to the ones that are on bases?
We learned how to operate those. We also learned how to operate larger radios that were used for bases and communications and between bases and stuff like that.
All right. So that's the second 8 weeks. So then after that's finished, what do you do next?
We went to, I got good at Morse code, or what I considered good, or what they considered good. And they sent me on to radio teletype school. And that was in Fort Gordon, Georgia. And we learned the more technical aspects of a radio. We learned how to actually build antennas, We actually didn't put much of our Morse code in practice. We were taught how to use secret gear, crypto gear, obviously radio teletypes where you actually fed the tape in, the ticker tape or whatever, and there was a message on there. We didn't get taught how to program those or print those, but we learned how to send them and how to operate the crypto gear that would scramble those messages. So we knew we were in for something special, but we didn't know what at that point in time.
Okay. Now, as that was going, as all of your training and stuff is going on, were you paying any attention to news from Vietnam, or were you just focused on your own training?
I think I was focused on training, and on the weekends I was focused on trying to have fun. I mean, you know, by the time you get to that advanced training, you actually have time off. There's not somebody on you 24 hours a day. So I was not really interested in the news at that time. A young guy would just hang out.
I don't know. What was there to do outside of Fort Gordon, Georgia?
Well, a bunch of us guys rented motorcycles. First time I'd ever been on a motorcycle, and we took trips probably through neighborhoods we shouldn't have been in, you know, making a lot of noise. And there was always, there was a movie theater on base, there was a cafeteria on base. And other than that, we'd hang out.
Okay. All right. So how long was that?
That
school?
was 6 or 8 weeks, I don't recall.
So when do you finish that?
I finished that in December of 1970, about the middle, and then they informed me I was going to Vietnam, and I got my orders, and they gave me a 15-day leave just prior to going over to Vietnam. Well, that put me right at leaving to go to San Diego, California, right at New Year's Eve.
Okay.
So obviously the whole 2 weeks I'm home, I'm trying to call a base and see if I can't get just a little bit longer, or maybe go through the new year, but you know, they wouldn't hear it. Yeah, we all have problems. We'll be here, or we'll make sure that we get you here. So so I had a 2-week leave and reported into San Diego, and from there I shipped out.
Okay. So how do they actually get you then from San Diego to Vietnam?
On a plane. My brother actually took a boat, and it was like 30 days. He said I was sick. He said, so hopefully you don't take a boat. But I got on a plane.
Okay. Was it a chartered commercial jet or a military
I
one?
think it was a commercial jet that was chartered by the service.
Yeah. And where did you land in Vietnam?
Saigon.
Okay. So Tan Son Nhut, the big airport?
Tan Son Nhut, yep.
Okay. All right. And what's your first impression of Vietnam when you get there?
That I was in a different world. That I was probably, I kind of felt I wasn't going to go anywhere. I wasn't going to make it. You know, you don't think of the future at that point. You know you're in serious trouble, but you don't know yet what kind of serious trouble you're in. I mean, you're going to be in a war zone. Okay. And you've heard all these stories, and we've had, at that point in time, 45,000 soldiers killed. So, you know, it just, it kind of reality sets in and says, you know, you may not make it.
Okay. And just on a physical level, what do you see or sense when you get off the plane?
Very warm, very humid. We got on a deuce-and-a-half truck to be carried to the transitory barracks, and on the way we saw dead bodies along the road. First dead body I had seen outside a casket. And, you know, I think everybody was pretty quiet at that time. Nobody said a word.
Okay. So you get to the transitory barracks, then what happens?
Well, we're waiting for orders, and all I remember is lying in bed thinking, this is it, you know, I'm here, and I hope I don't get killed. Yeah. Basically, that's self-preservation.
Okay. About how long did you have to wait?
Just a couple days. As I only remember getting a little training on how to deal with locals, the right things to say, the wrong things to say, and some sort of orientation like that.
Okay, so there's a little bit of orientation.
Yes, there was. There was actually a chaplain that came in and realized that we were probably scared to death, and but he explained the local customs and how you know, what not to say to somebody if they're not in the service, obviously.
Now, did you have orders for a particular unit, or were you just waiting for that?
We're waiting. At that point in time, I was waiting, and then like the second day, we got orders. I don't know how many from our group that came over. There's like 4. We got orders to go way up north to Phu Bai, which is probably 70 miles south of the demilitarized zone.
Mm-hmm.
And that we were going to be radio teletype operators with, well, I'm not sure. Yeah, I knew I was going to be with the Army Security Agency.
Okay.
Because they ran a secret, a top secret clearance process with me. They went and talked to my neighbors at home, my coworkers at work. Everybody thought I was in deep trouble.
Yeah.
At home, anyway. And so I knew I was with the Army Security Agency, and then I found out we were going to the 8th Radio Research Field Station in Phu Bai.
Okay. Phu Bai was also kind of where the 101st Airborne Division
Yes.
had its headquarters. And while a lot of American units had been pulled out by then, the 101st was still up there in that
Yes.
northern part of South Vietnam. Okay. How did they get you up to Phu Bai?
They flew me on a C-130 with, you know, those big fat airplanes with the back open. You can see the ground as you're flying, and there they try to get you up in the air as quickly as possible to avoid gunfire from the ground. And when you get over your area that you're coming to, it's a dive. So, you know, it's kind of a fun roller coaster ride, really.
I guess. Okay. So even going out of Saigon, they're worried about somebody might be
Oh, yeah.
shooting at you.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So when do you actually arrive then at Phu Bai?
It had to be about the 3rd of January of '71,
Okay.
because I left on New Year's Eve,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I crossed the international
Yeah.
date line, and it was all of a sudden January 2nd.
Yeah.
And so it went from the 31st to the 2nd,
Okay.
and
All right.
it was about the 3rd of January.
Okay. So what sort of reception do you get when you get to Phu Bai?
Just a welcome to Phu Bai and our company commander's office, telling us who he was, and then he gave his clerk, turned us over to him, and he showed us our barracks, showed us where we were going to be working, and we had, at that time, we could not go in there because we didn't have our security badges. So we got to know our barracks and our bunk, what bunk we're sleeping in, and that sort of thing.
Okay. And so how long did you have to wait to get the badges?
Probably just a day. I think it came shortly afterwards. They came and got us, brought us into the command center, and it was a rectangular room with desk, and it had white walls all the way around. And then at some point in time, they said, you know, here's what we're going to be dealing with. And they shut the lights off, and they turn the light on, and all the walls light up with all these maps: Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, the Tricor, or the Quang Tri province that we were located in. And you know, you're like, wow, this is like James Bond type stuff. You know, I don't even know if James Bond was popular at that
He
time.
had started.
But that's kind of what I remember it as. Is
Okay. So what was your actual job? When you started, what did they have you doing?
okay, they brought me. There was quite a large operating command post, but they put me in a radio van that was probably 10 by 14 with the radio equipment surrounding the outside walls. So there was just enough to scoot a chair in between radios. And I started out, well, I actually did most of my year communicating with pilots that had intercepted messages over different areas of the country. And they would transmit those to me, and I would basically sit on a typewriter and transpose that information and make a transcript of it. It made no sense to me at all. And then and that was like an 8-hour thing. I mean, you're sitting with headphones on talking to somebody in a plane. They're transmitting messages.
Okay. So what are you actually hearing? So you say, because you didn't know what it was. So were they
Just letters and numbers.
Okay.
And that sort of thing. You know, maybe some of them were in 4-letter groups, 4-number groups, five groups. And I actually got pretty fast. They could talk pretty fast, and I was pretty good at the typewriter. And we would take those messages, and once we got 2 or 3 of them together, we bring them into our command posts. And there was I think their MOS, or their job was MOS 72B, which were special radio decryptors, I guess you'd call them. And they would try to break the codes on them. Obviously, they had a lot of information from everywhere, you know, that this is how they normally meet.
So what you're transmitting is largely intercepted, coded material.
Yes. And we are just copying that down from the, not the pilot, but the radio operator in the sky.
Right.
And sending that in to be decoded. Probably, if there was anything that was of significance, maybe an hour later we would get a teletype of that message, and then we would have to send it out to our bases that were attached to us, so that everybody, you know, if it were saying that there's going to be a red alert tonight for Camp Eagle, so to speak, we would send that out, and they would get prepared for that.
Okay. Now, were those messages that you could read, or are you just told later that's what you were sending?
That's what we were told.
Okay.
You know, we could not, we didn't have you know, an automatic typewriter next to our teletype machine. We just knew it was sending it out.
Okay.
And it really probably didn't matter because we had crypto gear attached to it. So it was going out probably in garble.
Right.
And getting to the person that had the exact same crypto block and deciphering at that point in time. So we really never knew, you know, what kind of messages we were receiving and sending out.
Okay. So did you spend much of your tour inside that van?
Almost 99% of it. Yeah.
Okay. Was it at least air conditioned?
It was, because the radios had to be air conditioned.
Yeah.
And the crypto gear had to be air conditioned. So yes, it was air conditioned. It was very comfortable. Those guys, they usually transmitted, you know, later in the day until, say, midnight, and then they would head back. You know, the planes would head back. So the guys at night would only get an occasional message. You know, the night shift was the ideal shift. Yeah.
Did you rotate shifts?
Yes, we had 3 shifts, and I was on the mid-trick, and that was from 5 until midnight.
Okay. So describe the base facilities a little bit. What were your living conditions like?
It was a good-sized base. Our barracks were old French barracks, because there's been a lot of war there. A lot of people thought they could do what the United States was doing. And so we were in French barracks. So these are cement block buildings that were pretty secure, metal roofs. We had 2 bunks to an area, you know, inside. There was probably 12 to 14 guys in that particular barracks. And so it was luxurious compared to a lot of people.
All right. And this is a big base.
Yes, it's a pretty good sized base, yeah.
So
You could walk quite a while. I mean, if you were just exercising, you didn't do that back in the 70s, you didn't exercise. But if you had to go to, say, the mess hall, you walked a good half mile. And they actually had an EM club, an enlisted man's club, where it was kind of like a tavern.
Yeah.
And you could go there. They had, the USO had a building there where they played bingo and did some things to distract us. We had a library, and I got into reading at that time and read several war novels. I don't remember, it wasn't fancy at all, but it was not objectionable. You know, we could live there. I mean, there were rats and spiders and bugs and everything else, but, you know, people have that down in Florida. So.
Right. Okay. So was your were you in an area that was essentially all your unit, or were you?
Yes, the base was pretty well protected. It Constantine wire all the way around it, cyclone fencing all the way around it. We had one main entrance, the MPs, and we had one barracks full of MPs, and their job was to protect the main command office, the front gates, and all the locals, any local contractors coming in and out, making sure that they were clean when they walked in.
Okay. And now, was this sort of a compound within a larger base, or are you talking about the entire base?
I think the 101st, were so close to us now.
Yeah.
We never got to leave that fence. But yeah, we knew there was somebody else out there. We knew it was 101st, but
Right.
we never, it wasn't like we commingled, because about the only time we'd see somebody from the 101st was if you went to their mess hall, which was a nicer mess hall than ours, and every now and then we got treated to that. But it was a pretty good sized base, and what was really nice for me is they had a MARS station there, and people could call home from there. We would run the radios, and there was like 3 or 4 booths. And what we did is we would radio somebody in the United States, and it could be in Kansas, it could be in California, it could be in New York, whatever. We could call home if we wanted to, and people knew that we were a MARS station. So there was a lot of infantrymen that when they got time off, they came there and they called home. And it was a really fulfilling job. We did that on our spare time, and it really made me feel at least very helpful during the service.
Right. So that's a system where you've got ham radio operators using shortwave or whatever, and you get one of them, and they can physically call somebody
Right.
through the American phone system. And it was that one where if you were calling, you had to say over and
over. Yeah, my wife is very familiar with that, and it took a while for somebody to learn that, but we couldn't switch from receiving to transmitting unless we knew they were done with their statement.
Right.
So they would have to say over, and then the other person would have to say over, so that you had 2 radios working in sequence there, trying to make sure that they could talk legibly.
Yeah. Did you have any Vietnamese who would be on your base? Or?
Yes, we had somebody that actually cleaned barracks and worked in the mess hall and built things, if we needed sandbags, if there was a new building being built, they would be the contractors for them. So we had quite a few of them on base, as a matter of fact.
Okay, and they had to be probably fairly careful with them.
Yes, oh yeah, the MPs made sure that they had nothing with them. Obviously, after a while, it's the same faces. I always saw the same, what we called Mama-san in our barracks. She was our Mama-san, and she cleaned the barracks, and sometimes that was a job for a bunch of guys that would sit around, smoke cigarettes, and drink beer.
All right. Did they do laundry and things like that too, or was that done on the base by someone else?
No, actually, I think Mama-san would do that, typically for 2 packs of Salem cigarettes. It was no money ever transacted because our money was military money. It wasn't good in the country, to go out into the market. But I'm sure there were some black market things going on. But
Now, doing what you're doing, so over the course pretty much of the year 1971,
Right.
Are you aware of events that are going on in Vietnam and things that are happening?
whatever the Stars and Stripe allowed, and ARVN, which was the television station.
Okay.
We realized about halfway through that we weren't getting everything because we knew of things that were going on, and they weren't
The big
reporting
thing
that.
that went on in your area in 1971 was Lam Son 719. That was the South Vietnamese Army trying to invade Laos and mess up the North Vietnamese supply system. And the Americans were supplying artillery and air support and the helicopters and so forth for that. So were you doing messages relating to that, or did
Yes.
you? Okay.
Yeah, we had actually some of those pilots were flying over Laos and Cambodia, which we were watching on TV wasn't happening.
Yeah.
You know, so so that, you know, we knew that we were getting a filtered, redacted report.
And were you aware that invasion went badly?
I really didn't know. I don't think that we were told a whole lot about that.
Because you don't have a lot of the contents of the messages, so
Right.
So the traffic just slows down or stops after a while.
Yeah.
At least for that.
Yep.
But we're still doing observations of the Ho Chi Minh Trail and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and so there's still stuff going on.
Sure.
Were you doing things from anywhere in, you know, the Indochina region, or just for the northern part?
I think all of our people on the radio net, which would be the connected bases, were all, didn't go as far south as Da Nang.
Okay.
Went up to the DMZ, went to Hue, because we were only like 20 miles south away. So most of our stuff was called the, I don't remember the name, ICOR or something like that.
Yeah, ICOR. And then I guess the Marical Division is at Da Nang and south of there, but they're not part of what you're communicating
Right,
with.
right.
All right. Now, how dangerous was it to be in Vietnam where you were?
I would say that if anybody had to go, this was the place to go. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing happened. We had rocket fire several times while we were there. We had, in August, and I'd been there about 7 months, we had heavy rocket fire where, you know, you took cover. You were in the trenches, you were in secure areas, bunkers. We lost our antenna field at that time, and that was located not far behind our van. So we're out there trying to build antennas while we can see explosions on our base. You know, it was that close.
Okay. So you're still trying to do this and get this stuff back up and running even
Right.
while about how long did the rocket attack last?
I would say, you know, it seemed like a lifetime, but I would say about a half hour.
Okay.
And because we were out there, we knew we had lost communications, and we couldn't talk to Camp Eagle, we couldn't talk to Hue. So we had to, a couple of us guys went out there, and they call them a doublet antenna, and it's a wire on 2 poles that are cut to a perfect length, you know, with a junction point in the middle, and then a wire coming to our radio van, and well, our headquarters. We were out of the radio van at that time because we couldn't use it. But we built a doublet antenna, and sure enough, we actually heard people on the other end that were answering our call for the net. You know, we opened the net, and we maintained communications with them so that we knew what was happening, and we were the ones getting hit. They didn't know anything about it. So we knew that it wasn't like a large-scale offensive going on, or you know, that sort of thing.
It probably was in that case. I mean, rockets were not necessarily terribly accurate things,
No.
but they would point them at a big target, and your base is probably big enough to be a target.
Oh, yeah.
And so that they may have been coming for you at that point.
Yeah, it could have been. We always blamed it on the airport because that's what everybody said, you know. I wish they could make their rockets more accurate. They could hit the airport, not us, you know. But we had several red alerts where we had to take cover.
Okay. Now, somewhere along the line, you earned a Bronze Star. Was that for that activity?
It was right about then I got, I remember being in formation, which was very seldom that you had to do structured things anymore. You were just doing your job. And we had a lieutenant colonel, I guess, came through, and they lined us up and gave us the Bronze Star. And then there was a South Vietnam officer that followed him, and he gave us the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry for August 14. I got a letter of appreciation, and it was just to thank us for the job we did in an emergency situation.
Okay. Now, while you're based there, did you go off the base at all?
I did a few times. We had to make deliveries, you know, of sensitive pieces of equipment to some of our other radio operators. So we would visit a few of them and tell them what was going on, that we were going to start using this rather than that.
And where were those people that you visited? Where
They were, Way is one of them, and Camp Eagle was north of us.
Yeah.
That was another one. And I'm thinking over by China Beach there was something.
Okay.
I can't remember, but we ended up going to China Beach for that day.
Okay, what was China Beach?
China Beach was an R&R, in-country R&R, and you'd sit on a beach. They had a little bar there. There were helicopters landing all over the place to drop people off that got their one-day R&R, and it was, I don't know, kind of like the move. There was a program called China Beach,
show,
and it was kind of like that. There was obviously a medical area, and I actually sat on the beach for a couple hours.
Okay. And while you were in Vietnam, did you get an R&R? Did you get to go anywhere?
I had the opportunity, but I never took it. I never took an R&R from Vietnam.
Okay.
And when I think back on it, I only had 2 times when I left the service for any period of time. One was a weekend where we rented a plane out of Fort Knox, and then my 2-week leave just before going to Vietnam, and then the next thing you know, I was home permanently.
Okay. So over the course of that chunk of time when you're actually in Vietnam, but how long was the total stretch? Was it like 7
It was from until December 8th, 7th.
Okay, so pretty much the whole year.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Are there other particular events or things that happened or impressions you had from that year in Vietnam that kind of stay with you?
I just remember that you were with 12 or 14 guys that all had the same situations. I don't think any of us were married. We all had girlfriends. We talked about home. We talked about our folks. We talked about our girlfriends. We talked about our work. And I always remember telling the guys, listen, I have a job that I can see working for the rest of my life, and that's exactly what I did. So I was pretty proud of that job. And I also remember a kind of a funny occurrence. I told you I was with the MAR station, and my first chance to call home, I did. I talked to, I always remember her name. Her name was Joy, and she was in California. And she patched me through to my folks' home. And before we could talk, they obviously would check to see if he would pay for the long distance call from California. And they would tell my dad, well, they told my dad, he's the one that happened to answer the phone, said, would you accept long distance charges from Ron Minnema in California? And he said no. In those days, you didn't call long distance. Mm-hmm. And even if you had guests from out of town and they were going home and say, I'll call you when I get home, it meant 2 rings, we're home, 3 rings, answer the phone. But he would not accept that long distance call. So it was pretty funny. So I went and switched, and I had Joy call my girlfriend, and I got to talk to her, but I said, make sure you tell Dad the next time he gets a call to take it. It's, you know, I'll pay for the long distance charges. So.
Okay, so these guys you were working with, do you remember things like where they were from or what some of the backgrounds were?
Yeah, my best friend is from Salem, Missouri. We had people from Chillicothe, Missouri. We had people from California, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Oh, Pittsburgh is Pennsylvania, yeah. They were pretty much from everywhere. And Oklahoma.
And they were pretty much all about your age, or were some?
Yes.
Okay, so they had.
We had
college.
Actually the one friend I had was an older gentleman. I would say older gentleman. He was probably 27.
Yeah.
But he was in college, and he graduated, and they took him.
Right.
Soon as he got out, he didn't even have a chance at it. So he was our wise man. Mm-hmm. He was from Pennsylvania. He was the guy that could answer questions. And
Okay. And did you deal much with officers or just your sergeant?
not really. Sergeants mostly. Sergeant DeLuca was our platoon sergeant. He was a very good, fair man, and kept us informed of our duties. And in fact, what was really nice is my best friend from Missouri. He was his clerk, so we got to see things a little bit earlier than a lot of people. And no, I only think I met an officer when I got there.
Okay.
He was a very young man and didn't look any older than I was, but he graduated from some military school. And no, it was pretty much hands off there. And the structure, obviously you had your time to work and your time to volunteer at the MAR station. And we did have to pull guard duty a couple times a month, so we would go, I remember going to the 101st Airborne Base and pulling guard duty around their base. It's where we were sitting at bunkers and a gun and the whole thing.
I don't know. Was that kind of scary the first time you did that?
Absolutely. It's nighttime. And this was an ammo dump where there was live ammo, but it was also a lot of empty shells.
Like
Cannon
shell
shells.
casings,
Yeah, shell casings. And the rats were so prolific there. You could hear them running in those shell casings. And but you know, you're looking at, you can just barely see the fence line out there, and we had to set out claymore mines and defensive type stuff. But I never had a real incident there. And eventually, when I was promoted to sergeant, I was the sergeant of the guard, so I had to check each station along the way. And
So when they put you on guard duty, did they have you with any soldiers who knew what they were doing, or were you just you two guys get over there? And
there were other radio operators, but I don't remember any infantry people or 101st Airborne people at all.
So they might not have been too worried.
No, I'm thinking that the 101st Airborne probably wasn't going to be something that you would see maybe being taken by land. They might shoot rockets and stuff like that, but I never had to fire the weapon. The only time I ever fired a weapon in Vietnam was during the initial
That orientation.
orientation, where they took you out to because they knew you were going to be pulling guard duty, so they touch out, use a BAR and a 50 millimeter machine gun and that sort of thing.
You still had a BAR?
Yeah, Browning automatic.
My goodness, that's pre-World War I vintage.
Well,
Yeah.
well, these didn't look that old.
Okay.
These maybe they were something else, but
Because
that's what we
M60
call-
machine guns were common. But anyway.
Yes.
Okay. But I know they used BARs through Korea, and I think the Vietnamese probably had them.
Oh, nice.
Anyway.
I'm thinking if because you could carry them.
Yeah.
So I might have skipped over the fact that I was in the ROTC at high school.
Okay.
And we used M1s, which is really World War I.
Oh,
and
World War II.
II.
World War II. Be fair.
World War
Yeah.
II. And actual BARs and that sort of thing. So I might have it confused with the 50 millimeter.
Did that ROTC experience help you at all? when you were-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I was a good map reader. I was a good. I knew all of the things that a lot of people had to memorize. You know, the chain of command, and those were things that were second nature to me.
Like the marching drill.
Marching drill. Yep. What all the commands meant. It really prepared me. I did that because I thought maybe I would go in the service.
Okay. Pretty sensible on your part then. All right. Okay, so you leave Vietnam in December now, 1971. Now, were you going to get out of the Army at that point?
Yes, it was an edict by President Nixon that he was going to withdraw troops, and he had already started, I believe, before that. And they had a general rule that if you had less than 6 months to your next station, that they were going to give you an early out. So I got that order like in October already. That hey, you're not going to have to go anywhere else. You know, once you're done here, you're done.
All right. So what's the process for getting you out of Vietnam?
Well, they took an airplane back, landed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and went into a gigantic auditorium where people from all over Vietnam were ETSing out or separating out from the service. You had a couple of clerks walking around saying, "Here, you know, here's your orders. You're assigned to the reserve, and you may be called up anytime in the next 2 years." It was really a 4-year commitment, but we only had to spend 2 years in it. But they were kind of rude to us. I mean, people in the States weren't real happy, even in '71 yet. And I knew I lived through '68 to '71, but even some of the servicemen were pretty rude to us. There was no, I would call respect, you know, like treating. I remember them saying, "Is there any health concerns you have? Because if you have, you know, we can take the next few weeks and confirm those." And everybody coming back from Vietnam wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And so you didn't say a word. And then I meekly raised my hand and said, "Hey, you know, you've got my rank wrong." "Oh, we can fix that. We'll put you in the transit barracks, and in a couple of weeks we'll have that taken care of." So I said, "Forget it, it's fine," you know. So it was a kind of a rotten way to treat you when you came home.
Right. Now, did anyone, either while you were still in Vietnam or when you got back there, try to get you to re-enlist?
Yes, before I left, we had like an orientation period of going back to the States, and we had to clear all kinds of stations. All your clothing had to be returned, and you got issued Class A's for going home, and you had to go to the recruitment office, and there they would have a lot of money sitting on a table and say, "This would be yours tax-free if you want to sign up for another 4 years." And they said, "But you will have to serve 1 year in a combat zone." And at that time, you know, there was no problem having combat zones. Vietnam was still going at that time. So I chose not to do that. And once, yeah, it just, I think you got more respect while you were there in Vietnam than you did when we got home.
Yeah, well, in Vietnam, they're all in the same boat.
Yes, you're all in the same boat. I mean, there were people that complained every minute that they were there. I wasn't one of those. I loved the time with my comrades, and I just, you know, just told stories that I wouldn't normally tell to anybody, and shared things that I wouldn't share with anybody. It's a different kind of friendship. It's,
yeah. The closest thing that a lot of civilians today would think of might be if they go off to college someplace and they're living in a dorm and they're away from home and it's all new, and especially if there's no great inflation, you know, there's pressure. So you are together with this small group of people, and you get to know them really well, and they can be friends for life. But the military is a much more intense version of that.
Yes.
That's what you got. Okay. So you're there, so you're basically discharged right there at Fort Lewis?
Yes, in Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay. Now, at that point, so you're going to fly home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did they tell you did you fly home in uniform, or did they tell you to put on civilian clothes?
No, they suggested we fly home in uniform because we could get military standby tickets.
Right.
Because they just gave us a travel allowance. It was up to us to you know, arrange our travel plans.
Okay.
So I can remember like 4 of us taking a taxi to the airport and kind of saying goodbye and splitting up there. I've got to go to the North Central at that time, I think it was, and before it was Northwest. And
Okay. Now, did you encounter any protesters or anything while you were in the airport?
when we got off the plane, there were people behind a fence line that were kind of yelling. I didn't get the spitting and, you know, but there were people that were, you know, not happy.
Okay. So when you're in the airport or on the airplane, did anyone treat you funny, or were they nice?
No, everybody was pretty nice to us. I don't remember any negative experience. I had to spend the night in the airport because I was too late to get a plane out. So, and then I got to Chicago and had to spend another night there because it was too late to get a plane out. But that was back when Grand Rapids had a few planes, but at 8 o'clock nothing was going on. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember that, any kind of negative things. I wore the uniform the whole way home and slept in it, and didn't have a desire to change clothes or anything like that.
Okay. Another stray question is one that I'll ask of most people who go to Vietnam. You have sort of the pop culture vision of Vietnam and so forth. One of the things that gets talked about a lot was drug use.
Yes.
Were there people using drugs
Yes,
there?
there was. A lot of people. Not particularly in our barracks.
Yeah.
But we would go on guard duty and get in the bunker, and there would be all kinds of paraphernalia in there. So we knew that things were going on.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anybody personally that was doing that over there. I actually tried a hit of it from some guy I met on guard duty, and I swore never do that again. I think I slept half my guard duty away, you know. I mean, I could have been firing in front of a firing squad for that.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, this was also a period when heroin was around. Because we had shut down the exports through Cambodia, and so a lot of the stuff got dumped in Vietnam. But basically, probably with a group like yours, because you're fairly well trained and close knit and confined and have to behave themselves.
Right.
You're not going to have most of those kinds of discipline problems.
Right. I just think that there was no way of. I mean, I suppose there's always a way of getting drugs on the base, but we were pretty well sequestered and protected and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. So now you get back. You're discharged. You get to the end of '71. You go home. Now what do you do?
Within a couple days, I went back into my old employer, and I said, I'm back. And the law is that they had to reinstate you, and you were supposed to be given all the raises, general increases.
Yeah.
In other words, you didn't get merit increases because you weren't there, obviously. And I had kind of a weird personnel director. I said, I asked him what I was making, and he told me, and I said, wow, that's pretty weird. I thought I was supposed to get raises along the way, or at least general increases. And he was one of those that said, the government tells me I got to take it back, but it doesn't tell me what I have to pay you. And it was in that tone of voice that I thought I was almost flabbergasted. I thought they would be happy to see me back. It was almost like it was a burden on them because they had to hire somebody else. And I don't know. I didn't get a good taste in my mouth from that interview that day. But they did take me back, and I worked until 2008.
Okay.
Started there when I was 17 and retired when I was 58.
Okay. And when did you get married?
1972.
Okay.
June of 1972. Barb and I knew each other very well. I talked about it. We talked about getting married. And she stuck with me that whole 2 years, and we got married 6 months after I got home.
Okay. Now, did you have any difficulty making the transition from military life back to civilian life?
Other than watching my language and not throwing cigarette butts on the floor. I actually did that in my mother's home because we were used to chucking them, and I actually threw one and took a deep dive to try to save that thing from burning the carpet. But yeah, it was pretty bad. And my language wasn't what it should have been. And
There were just a lot of extra four-letter words,
Yes.
or the F word being a
Right.
verb and everything. Yeah.
Right. And I think that helped me in later life because I just don't use those words anymore. I mean, I might exclaim something if something big should occur, but you can, if you were to talk to my wife, she would say that he never curses, and my kids would be flabbergasted if I said anything in front of them. So.
Okay. So if you look back over the time you spent in the service, what do you think you learned from it, or what did you take out of it?
I became a man. I was an immature kid that had never traveled anywhere. Within a few hours of going to Detroit, I was on a plane to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I was scared to death. I didn't know how I was going to survive it. I didn't know how to make a room reservation or plane ticket reservation. The government took care of us at that point in time. But I learned that after a while, you have to do things on your own. And you're going to, you know, out of my class in Fort Gordon, there was only like 4 of us that went to Vietnam. So you lost a lot of your friends and you never saw them again.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned that, you know, nothing is guaranteed, and I've got to be able to do this on my own, and I'm going to have to be a leader rather than a follower. So I think that helped me in my job and my family and that sort of thing.
All right. The whole thing makes for a pretty good story, so thanks for coming in and sharing it today.
Thank you so much. Again, you don't have too many conversations like this. I don't think I've ever done it since I've been home. So.
All right, very good.